Hello everybody and welcome back to Kirkham A Movie A Day video blog. It's been almost 2 years since I posted a video review of a movie, and I had a couple of movies that I saw recently that I thought I'd better catch up on, and I'm not sure that I'm going to have time to write about them, so I thought I would post a couple of reviews online on video, which, like I said, is sometimes fun. I'm not sure how much people actually watch the videos, but hopefully that covers it for you, and that'll be good enough. Today we're going to start with The Greatest Beer Run Ever, which is from director, producer, writer Peter Farrelly, who won the Academy Award for Best Picture a couple of years ago for Green Book, a film that was criticized for winning the Academy Award because it was a mainstream film and it seemed to be pretty standard stuff. I don't understand the dislike of that kind of film. To me, that's exactly the kind of thing that brings in a lot of people to movie theaters who are not usually moviegoers. People who want to see something that they're interested in, but something that is not being given to them at home on streaming or that they're seeing in a lot of mainstream theaters. The Greatest Beer Run Ever, I see online, has gotten a few critical comments similar to that, suggesting that one of the quotes was, "It's a film your father will like." Well, I'm a father and I did like it, but I think other people would like it as well. It's based on a true story. There, at the end of the film, you get pictures of the guys that were actually involved in the story. The main character is played by Efron, and he's basically a civilian who did serve in the military in the early 60s before the Vietnam War started, but when some of his friends from the neighborhood get drafted or enlist in the military during the Vietnam era, he wants to support them, and he's going through what a lot of Americans went through at the time, uncertainty about where their loyalties should lie. Let's face it, you wanted to back up the American government, you wanted to support your country, you believed that we were doing right, and when the protesters were in the streets, it seemed like they were supporting the other side, and that created a lot of resentment. In this story, of course, there's resentment between this character and his own sister, who is protesting the war, and he thinks that he needs to do something to support the troops. It starts off as a comedy. It's very amusing at the beginning. The character finagles a lot of things. He seems to be kind of avoiding work at all costs, and I understand that sometimes it's nice to take some time off. He's a merchant marine, so he can sign up anytime that he wants to do some work, find a trip that he's qualified for and sign up. And somehow he kind of corners himself into doing a beer run. He suggests that the best way to maybe support the troops is to actually go over and see his friends and bring them some beer from home. Not like they couldn't get beer there where they were. I'm sure it's available and there's plenty of it. But the idea that he would be making the beer run for them and he would be bringing it to them as a show of support. And he thought that this would be a good idea. And all of his friends at home who aren't going think he's crazy. And he probably was a little bit crazy to do it. He finagles his way onto a boat. He ends up in Vietnam during the war. He ends up trying to deliver the beer in some pretty dangerous spaces, and he discovers that the war isn't really everything that he thought it was. His buddies are really at risk in a couple of places. It's very dangerous. There's a lot of subterfuge that goes on in the movie as well, and I think that might very well be based on some true things. This is, of course, also a book, because it was a true story. Somebody wrote about it. He gets conflated with being in the FBI, not the FBI, the CIA, because he shows up in this war zone dressed like he's going on a Hawaiian vacation, and he's on a military base, and he's finagled his way in there, and suddenly he's getting treatment that he wouldn't normally get, except people think that he's in the CIA, and so they're trying to accommodate him. And it appears that there was a lot of that kind of thing going on, where there were CIA operatives who operated on military bases, but they were informal and they don't really identify themselves. And so he passes himself off as a CIA agent. He never directly says it. He just kind of hints at it with others, and they take the lead from there, which is one of the funny things about the story. But of course, there are also tragic consequences to it as well. I'm not sure how great the tragedies are, or how accurate all of the tragedies were. Some of the stories are apocryphal about the way the CIA might have interrogated prisoners during the war era. There's a long sequence on a helicopter that feels like it came from another movie. I'm not saying that it's inaccurate, but I am a little bit suspicious of it. But that's not the point. This is a big movie that's not really getting a big release. It's an Apple film, so it is available on streaming for people. But I saw it in a theater, and that's basically what this website does, of course, is to provide you with the material from theatrical releases. And I thought it looked spectacular. It's really well staged. There are huge battle sequences that take place in the film that involved obviously a lot of logistics. Some of it probably is CGI, but there are some things that are clearly done on set that are pretty spectacular and involved a lot of people and a lot of explosions. The main character ends up involved in events that are happening during the Tet Offensive. And again, that feels a little familiar. Anybody who's seen Full Metal Jacket knows how Tet suddenly became kind of a turning point in the war. Even though we were successfully able to fight back against the enemy in those situations, it demonstrated that they were committed and capable of doing these kinds of things. And suddenly this was not a police action anymore. It was a full war. And it was probably a turning point for a lot of people in their attitude about the war. This particular character goes through this very same change, only he's got a different perspective on it as a result of actually being there. One of the secondary characters in the film is played by Russell Crowe, who is a photojournalist who's covering the war for, I believe it's Life magazine or Look magazine. And he helps the main character out a couple of times. Look, Russell Crowe has transitioned from being a lead to being a character actor. Some of that is because of his age, some of it's because he's gotten a little bit heftier as he's grown older, and let's face it, he's a little grizzled. However, he's walked through a few roles. I thought earlier this year he was kind of silly in the Marvel movie, the Thor: Love and Thunder. It was okay, but he's kind of got a silly part in that. This is a much more serious part. I think he does a better job of acting than he has in the last dozen years, except for maybe The Nice Guys. And so it's really worth seeing the film in part for him. So between Russell Crowe and Zac Efron, you've got two excellent actors who are doing a good job telling a story that people aren't going to be particularly familiar with, that has humorous elements to it, but also is very serious about how the Vietnam War was, how we made a transition in our attitudes toward the war for a variety of people. It's I think, still a very supportive of the American troops, and that's one of those things that makes it worthwhile to see. But it's also critical of the way the war was being managed, and let's face it, it was not being presented by the government in the way that the media was presenting it, and the media presentation was maybe a little bit more accurate. At least that's the suggestion of this film. I'm not sure how many people will ever see the film in a theater. I'm not sure if it's still in theaters anymore, but you can watch it on Apple TV, and I would suggest that you find it and watch it because it's a worthwhile endeavor. All right, well, that's it for this review. Hopefully everybody has enjoyed that and got enough information about the movie that they're willing to go and see it themselves. Until next time, this is Richard Kirkham at Kirkham A Movie A, signing off. See you in the theater.